How many times a day do we hear about man-made global warming? Everywhere we turn, we keep hearing about it in the newspapers, on the internet, on the radio, and on the Weather Channel. They say the science is settled. They say that humans are causing great damage to the planet and that we must stop now or there will be irreversible damage that will cause mass starvation, cost millions of lives, entire species will be wiped out, not to mention whole cities and countries will disappear into the ocean. The only solution, they say, is to enforce drastic policies that will cost the world economy trillions of dollars in an effort to reduce man-made carbon dioxide. That's pretty scary stuff. But is that actually true? Or is the global warming argument just an excuse to limit freedom and exert more control over people's lives? In this speech, I would like to explore two different specifics about global warming. First, I'd like to explore some of the things that we hear in the media and why we should always take these things with such a very large grain of salt. Second, let's take a look at the evidence to see if the Earth is in fact warming. Global warming activists like to point out examples such as the melting glacier which sits atop of Mount Kilimanjaro in northern Tanzania near the equator. Also, that satellites have been measuring temperatures near its summit for more than 25 years, finding no warming at all, yet the global warmers use Kilimanjaro as one of their main points when speaking about global warming. A scientific study published in Nature magazine in November 2003 explained that deforestation of the mountain slopes is actually caused by a process called sublimation, not warming temperatures, and that this is what is causing the melting, which has been going on since the late 1800s, long before there was any significant man-made carbon dioxide. But the scientists that are trying to scare people into believing global warming don't particularly care why Kilimanjaro is melting, only that it is. Any other facts get in the way of their lobbying and fundraising efforts in order to fund more global warming studies. One undisputable fact is that if studies find that man-made global warming is not a problem, then it makes sense that funds provided to study global warming would dry up quickly, would they not? So I think that we can all agree that it is in the global warming scientists' best interest to keep the fear of global warming at a high level so that they can keep the government funds to study it rolling in. Another example of false global warming theory that you can read about on johndaly.com is the hockey stick theory or study by Michael Mand. He produced a graph shaped in the form of a hockey stick indicating that global temperatures were steady for the last 1,000 years until increasing rapidly at the start of the 20th century. This study was used in several papers by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, warning about the dangers of global warming. It was also used in Al Gore's movie called An Inconvenient Truth. It turns out the only thing that's inconvenient in this study are the facts. According to deepclimate.org, Canadian researchers Stephen McIntyre and Ross McKittrick debunked his theory in 2005 and found that 105 of the 112 data sets that Michael Mann used were incomplete, flawed, or incorrect. These are just a few examples of things that are often heard in the media about global warming that are easy to believe but not necessarily true. Scientists can say whatever they want, but that doesn't make them correct. When you really look at what sometimes scientists are saying, you will often find that there's no evidence or that the evidence is false. They say that the ice caps are melting and that every day the Earth is getting warmer. But is it actually warming? Over the past few years, anecdotal evidence for a cooling planet has exploded. UKRooters.com says that China had its coldest winter in 100 years. Baghdad saw its first snow in all recorded history. North America had the most snow cover in 50 years, with places like Wisconsin having the highest since record-keeping began. There have also been record levels of Antarctic sea ice, as well as record cold temperatures in Minnesota, Texas, Florida, Mexico, Australia, Iran, Greece, South Africa, Greenland, Argentina, and Chile. According to climate.missouri.edu, last winter, right here in southern Missouri, we saw the coldest temperatures it has seen in over 2 decades, with lows dropping into the teens below zero. And the list goes on and on. No more than anecdotal evidence to be sure, but now that evidence has been proved by hard scientific fact. All 4 major global temperature tracking outlets have released updated data. All show that global temperatures have been flat or decreasing slightly since 1998. Kenneth Tapping, a solar researcher with Canada's National Research Council, wrote an article called Space Weather Week, which links the cooling to reduced solar activity, which he claims is a much larger driver of climate change than any man-made global greenhouse gases. The dramatic cooling seen in 2007 and 2008 seems to support his theory, as substantially lower global temperatures coincided with exceptionally low sunspot activity during the same time period. While the data doesn't itself disprove that carbon dioxide is acting to warm the planet, it does demonstrate clearly that there are more powerful factors at work affecting the climate. Tapping concedes that the low sunspot activity could be indicative for another cycle of extremely low sunspot activity called a minimum. The last major minimum, called the Maunder minimum, occurred from 1675 to 1715 and coincided with the coldest part of a period known as the Little Ice Age. In fact, if we go back in history, we can find that there have been several periods where the temperatures have been much warmer and much colder than they are today. During the medieval warm period from about 1800 AD to 1300 AD, ice core studies indicate that the Earth was much warmer than today, at a time when CO2 levels were much, much lower. So if CO2 is the main driver of global warming, then how come temperatures aren't much higher today than they were during a time when the Vikings had settlements in Greenland and wine was produced in England? These facts prove that the Earth is not actually warming at all. Scientists can claim that global warming is occurring all they want, but they can't ignore the hard facts that show that it isn't. Next time you hear something about global warming, you might want to question what you hear, because once they begin demonizing skeptics, it's no longer about science, it's about politics. Global warming has been blown out of proportion in the media by many different politicians and scientists who have no sufficient data or evidence that it's actually occurring. It is being used as an excuse to limit freedom and exert more control over people's lives. Although you may hear about global warming every day, about how humans are the cause and how we must take great measures and cost the economy trillions of dollars to fix global warming, take the time for yourself to get the real facts and not just believe what scientists can't even prove is true.